So it's time to break down the solo here in Super Dom Blues. So what we have here is a 12/8 blues in G. So that makes our 1 chord G7, and our 4 chord a C7, and our 5 chord a D7. What's happening here is, as I stated, I'm not going to play any pentatonic licks where we would normally play them in a blues, such as if I had a G7, you know, more times than not, we would play a G minor pentatonic. What I'm trying to do is to give you new ideas and new sounds, as well as phrasing, but most importantly, let's start off with new sounds over these chords. So over the dominant chords, the first two, G7 and C7, I'm going to play minor 7 arpeggios, and I'm going to stick with that throughout the whole solo. So for G7, I'm going to play a minor 7 arpeggio built on the third. That's going to be my formula. Same thing for C7. So for G7, I'm going to play B minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, which is this. Now what's in a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio is, and let's think from B for a second, is a root, which in this case is B. Then we have the flat third, which is D. Then the flat 5, which is F. And then the flat 7, which is A. Now, what you need to do is connect them to G, because we're playing them over G. So those chord tones I just named out apply to G7 like this. Our B is now the third, the D is the fifth, and the F is the flat 7, and the A is the 9. So according to G7, I have the 3, 5, flat 7, and 9. I do not have a root, which again makes my melodies pretty interesting that I never go to the root. You have to be pretty careful when you're constructing these lines, because if you play them a certain way, you're going to want to hear the root. So I tried to purposely play the lines so they're interesting enough where I'm not dying to hear the root. So what I did is I started out in this area that I just played for you, and I stick around here exclusively for all my G7 licks. And when I get to C7, I'm going to play a minor 7 arpeggio once more, built off the third once more, which is E. And I'm going to use another fingering though, because I want to stay in the same area as this. So what I did is I started a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio from here, from the E, the third. Actually, when I line these up, really the vision for me is from the flat 7. So from E minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, I'm seeing the vision here from the flat 7. And when you look in your PDF chart, you're going to see all of these arpeggios written out for you. So don't worry, you'll have them all on paper and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to write out all the arpeggios from their root, starting from the flat third, flat 5, and the flat 7. So you'll be able to play in different areas. And also, when we start playing some variations, you're going to see how I'm going to move into those areas, just so you can see some, some new lick ideas. So back to the C7, what I'm playing is minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, built from the third, which is E, but I'm seeing its vision from its own flat 7, which is D. So in the key of E, the flat 7 is the D. So my arpeggio is this. Again, it's real slow. Now, as you watch me play these, you might be thinking, this is definitely not the 2-note per string advantages that we have from the pentatonic minor scale. No, it's not, but you'll see that there's other things that these type of arpeggios offer me that the pentatonic doesn't. So there's advantages hidden in here. I'll show you in a second. Another thing to point out before we get into the licks is also look how these arpeggios are constructed. I purposely have them set up this way. 2 notes on the 5th string, 1 note on the 4th string, 2 notes on the 3rd string, 1 note on the 2nd string, and 2 notes on the E string. That helps me with some of the techniques that I'm going to use in here, such as sweep picking, because the timing of my right hand, I've trained it so it's very used to playing hammer-ons on those strings, the 5th, the 3rd, and the 1st string, and then having the single notes on the 4th and the 2nd string. So if I did something like this, my hand knows, where to go, and that just feels very comfortable to me. When I use that technique, I like the sound of that, that liquid type of sound I get from doing it this way. Okay, so let's go to the top of the solo. So we know that I'm using this minor 7 arpeggio, minor 7 flat 5, and we know why I'm using it. So what I do is I start off with a bend. Now, here's the first thing to take into account. Just because I showed you this fingering doesn't mean you need to play it literally. So what I'm doing here is I'm utilizing the half step below my F. I'm also displacing my F from that original fingering I showed you to be over here. So I want to hear the note, but I'm just coming up to it from the half step below. I want to be able to bend. So the notes that I just gave you are just a frame of what you can play. And you can literally start off a line. So I just played a half step below all the notes that I showed you. That's exactly what I'm doing over here to get it going. Just as a side note, the phrasing on this bend, sometimes you hear people play something and it sticks in your head forever. For me, this came from, if you have a Wayne Krantz CD called 2 Drink Minimum, the very last track called Link's Paw. Listen for that bend. You'll find it. And when you do, it'll stick in your head too. So I'm coming up from a half step below the flat 7 of my G7 chord. And I'm going to do it again. What I'm doing is utilizing the triplets. I'm playing in 12/8, and I'm utilizing the triplets and coming down just for this nice cool line that kind of comes back and forth. What I mean is I go down, come back up, and back down. And I'm using only the notes in that arpeggio. A little bit of hybrid picking here too. I use that to put a snappy attack inside of my lines. And when I do it, it's right over here, right after my bend, my second one. You know, when I'm coming out of the upbeat of 4 and going into the second measure, I catch that D with my second finger. My hybrid picking technique is, if you see my nail here and my finger, I'm coming down on this angle. And when I go to pick a string, I get right under it with my flesh and my nail at the same point. What I do to be able to not make so much noise is I keep my nail pretty close to my finger, my flesh here. So I purposely cut them so that the white part is almost non-existent here, but then it comes out. You know, it makes not a point, but it just comes out more. So that combination there, that's where the sound comes from. So we put it all together. Caught another hybrid pick note there too as well on the second B, which is on the third beat, second triplet. And then come down on that flat 7 to give it a nice quarter step pull. The cool part here is this minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio is giving me this really cool sound, you know, really exploiting the 9 and the flat 7. And also like the fact that I get this cool major third interval that's displaced, meaning it's not even in the chord. And it's a very consonant sound. So, you know, all of this falls under the term superimposition. You're going to hear that a lot in this course because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm superimposing B minor 7 flat 5 over G7. So let's make sure the definition of superimposing is out there and you clearly understand what it is. Superimposing is taking a secondary element, which in this case is our B minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. So that's our secondary element, and we're putting it over a primary element, in this case, our G7 chord. So secondary element over primary element. So this B minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio gives me a G9 sound. It's because of that A that's in there. And I like that fact, the fact that that A is accompanied by this major third from the flat 7. Remember, when I talk about these intervals in these superimposed arpeggios, that I'm referring to the chord. You know what these intervals are over the chord. So over this G root, this B is the major third, the D is the 5th, the F is the flat 7, and the G is the 9. Okay, so let's move along. What we have happening here in the third measure is a pickup note to the downbeat of the fourth measure, and I'm still continuing to use the minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. But what I'm going to do is employ some of the sweep picking I was talking about before. So the lick is this. You could play with alternate picking. I just find it easier to play with all downstrokes. So I start the first note with a downstroke, kind come in with a hammer on, and I let the pick fall into the F and A. And, you know, on different days I do this part differently. I could play this next part with a downstroke or an upstroke. So I get more of a snap when I play with the upstroke, but as you can see, the slower tempos, it's more comfortable for me to play with the downstroke. But at higher tempos, I seem to go for the upstroke. And at higher tempos, too, I'm more concerned with my dynamics, you know, of this type of lick. So I go for that upstroke to really have it jump out. The other thing that's going on here is the fact that I'm sliding into chord tone. So once again, I'm not just literally playing what's in the fingering. I'm using different ways to phrase and slur the notes inside of the arpeggio. You know, it's also a pretty cool bluesy thing to do, to come into a, you know, slide into a gutsy sounding minor third interval. Okay, so right after that is an important concept that I'm going to utilize a lot as well in this solo and the ones to follow, and that is taking advantage of half-step relationships between changes. So if you just look at the bare minimum here, G7 to C7, there's a half-step relationship between this B, which is the third of G, and this B flat, which is the flat 7 of the C7. Well, that shows up in this lick. So after I play in the fourth measure, coming out of the sweep, right on the downbeat of the fifth measure, I play another dyad. It's a third. It's a major third this time because I've lowered the B to B flat, but retained the D. So after I play, very cool concept, very important to know and to start to incorporate into your playing when you want to start really coloring changes and outlining changes. This is the real deal, and the best way to do it is this half-step relationship idea. So before we look at these C7 licks, let's review that arpeggio real fast. So over C7 we're playing E minor 7 flat 5. So within that arpeggio, that's a pretty uncomfortable fingering to play by itself, but as you'll see, the licks are anything but that fingering. What I'm trying to do is get as much you know, play out of the fingering without torturing myself with the difficulty of it. So I play the dyad here, which had me take this note, the D, and displace it. So sometimes I'll unison displace notes in order for me to get ideas across. Remember, I did that in the first part of, you know, right at the beginning in the B minor 7 flat 5 lick, where I was bending from E to F, or the 6 to flat 7. I'm bending to a note that was outside of the realm of the fingering, but I needed to do that because first I can't bend from back here, and second I like the sound of the second string. So over here I took my D, put it over here so I can get my major third. I follow that with another one of those half-step bends that bends to a chord tone. And this is one of the cooler ones to do. In C, I'm bending an E flat to an E, which is a flat 3 to a 3. So whether you do it as a grace note bend, or slowly, even a ghost bend, you know, or a pre-bend, the one that wiggles back and forth, it's going to sound cool because flat 3s and 3s, slurring of those thirds over dominant chords is always a great thing. And what is that? Half-step relationship. Not coloring the changes, but it's still half-step usage. So from here, get right into that fifth, and I snap right over to the C to a D bend, a whole step bend. So put it all together, and you got. You notice also I'm using that hybrid picking again. For dyads, I like to grab them with my second and third finger, and in these I'm picking the bend, note, and bend. So, okay, so we go to the second measure of the 4 chord, which is bar 6. And after I hold that bend, I'm going to fall into, which are notes still exclusively in E minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio. I'm playing B flat, G, and D. But what I'm trying to do, my destination, is this fifth. So I fall off this bend. So so I can get over to that major third, you know, the from C. I don't play that C, but just to illustrate the major third. And immediately from there, I bounce over back to E flat. Now, this is the first of many times when I'm really exploiting the most important interval in a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, which is also the most important interval in a dominant chord, and that is the tritone, the flat 5. In a minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, that's from the root to the 5th. That's why we call it a flat 5. Inside the dominant chord, this is the 3rd to the flat 7. This is what gives a dominant chord its thing. That's what gives them their grit, is that interval in there. So that's my goal to get from this rake, so I can play that 3rd to 5th. Right after that, after I play that note and give it a little quarter step pull, you'll notice I play those a lot. That's a big part of my phrasing. Is I bounce right into a half step relationship. I go back into the major third of the G as I approach it. So there I am again, giving the half step movement to color, or to play over the changes to link them together. I'm going to start, I'm going to play here this B, come down to the bottom half of my minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, and then I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump up, you know, from the F to the E, so that's a major 7. Though I'm bending up from the E to F, so that makes it an octave. I do this a lot to break up these arpeggio sounds. I don't want them to sound like this all the time. I don't want them to sound so connected, because then they'll start to sound too patterny. So one way I do this is throw larger intervals inside. So I go from this portion of the arpeggio to this portion of the arpeggio. And you could think of these as little mini motifs inside of the lick. So as I come out of this one, I jump over to this one. So when you're putting your own licks together, it's a good idea for you to really play the arpeggio and look for the places where you're comfortable with your own mini motifs. Like I like this. I like the one I just played. This one, you know, always feels great. You know, you can just keep going. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them in there. So that'll help you be able to take advantage of this concept of playing mini motifs inside of the arpeggio and splitting them with big intervals to give it a more interesting sound. So following this, I'm jumping into bar 8 with a line that uses more hybrid picking. You know, and I'm really, for me, my vision is I'm using a D minor arpeggio vision inside of this just to help me with the fingering here, you know, to give me another idea. That lives inside of B minor 7 flat 5. So that's what this lick is. And again, check out those intervals. After the minor third thing here, which I play with pick and hybrid picking, I pick and hybrid pick a 5th, and then I pick and hybrid pick a 6th. So 3rd, flat 3rd, 5th, 6th. So that completes the first 8 bars of super dom, and it also completes our usage of the minor 7 flat 5 superimposition. What we're going to do here for the 5 chord for D7 is another superimposition. I'm going to use the A minor pentatonic scale. So what that's going to do is give us a collection of chord tones over the D7, and let's go through them. So here's a root position, A minor pentatonic scale, and I'll tell you what the notes are according to D. So the A is the 5th, the C is the flat 7, the D, of course, is the root, the E is the 2, but more commonly known as the 9, the G is the 4 or the 11. One of the tones we definitely have to watch out for, as you'll see in a second. And the A, you know, back to the octave, is the 5th. Okay, so what happens here in bar 9 is I'm actually going to use a pentatonic scale down here, the one below the root position A minor pentatonic I just played. I'm going to play the one that starts from the flat 7, think of an A for a second, which is the G. And the fingering is this. Now I'm going to write these out for you. They'll also be in your PDF charts. So you'll be able to see all 5 A minor pentatonic fingerings. So I borrowed this one just for a second so I can play something that is conventional, yet I'm putting it in a place that is not conventional. What I mean is this lick. Now that lick, in some way, shape, or form, is the predecessor to a zillion other licks. But just the start of that, you know, we could go in a million different areas. Like, but you see, all the licks I just played are actually, those were G licks. Those were G minor licks. I'm not doing that. I'm utilizing A minor pentatonic. I'm using the notes within A minor pentatonic so I can set up an A minor pentatonic lick that's superimposed over a D7 to give me 9/11 sounds. So what I did is I played that intro part and then slid into the next position of A minor pentatonic, the root position, the one I originally showed you, so I can play this. I just walked right down that, so altogether it sounds like this. That run rhythmically comes out that when I play the G, the note I told you to watch out for, it lands on the 10th bar, which is where G7 appears. You know, it comes back into the changes. The reason why you want to watch out for a G or a fourth or 11th over a dominant chord is because it's a big time clash. Remember I said before, the most important part of a dominant chord is its 3 and its flat 7, that relationship, the tritone. Well, let's put that tritone over here for a second, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a 4th degree against this tritone with an open G. That's not the right sound. I like the sound, but it's just not the right sound for this. Even though this course is full of all kinds of sounds that might not be right to your ear at first, this is one it just doesn't seem to work for this stuff. So that's the note to avoid in terms of resolving. You can play it, just use it as a passing tone. Okay, so that brings us through the whole chorus here for Super Dom. Let's just play it through here and put it all together. So we're starting out with our half step bend, rolling into that really cool line. Remember the hybrid picking that's involved here? We're catching that D, and also the second time we play the B. Notice sometimes I even start the bend with that hybrid pick technique because I like the sound. Following that is a pickup note from the 3rd bar going into the 4th bar, still using B minor 7 flat 5. And we're sweeping, using sweep picking to get into that sliding, you know, gutsy minor 3rd, which half step resolves into this major 3rd from B flat to D over the C7. Another half step bend to chord tone. Whole step bend, which falls into a reverse rake to slide into the 3rd to flip right into the B flat, which exploits that tritone interval. And then from there, I'm going to take that B flat and half step connect back into the 1 chord. We're at bar 6 at this point. Remember, I'm using those little mini motifs right now. I'm at the bottom half of my B minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, upper part, and then I'm going to utilize kind of a D minor vision to pick, hybrid, pick, hybrid, pick, hybrid, different intervals, minor 3rd, 5th, 6th. Then we're going to get out of superimposing minor 7 flat 5s and flip over to superimposing minor pentatonic scales, and we got this the tried and true intro, yet played in an unconventional manner. Slide into the upper part of a root position A minor pentatonic and come right down in those triplets. They're a little quick, because remember the tempo here is 160, and those triplets are subdividing you know, the dotted quarter notes at 160. So it could be a little fast, but you know, take it slow and build up to that speed. So we walk down and hit that G7. We land on that G and hit the G7, and you know, I close it out with some hints towards some of the chords we're going to be using in the rhythm part. F sharp minor 7 flat 5. There we go. I'm superimposing that over the D7 chord, so I'm even doing it with harmony. And then I play an upper string B minor 7 flat 5 over for the G. That's that.